Oh, I was just visiting with Doogie, Dr. Howser. Listening to his plan to part one, the plan's pulsating red lips with his probing pubescent tongue.
Great going.
Remember when a teenager somehow balanced high school, a best friend, and performing actual life-saving surgeries, all while still being legally required to do homework? Premiering on ABC in 1989 and running for 4 seasons, Doogie Howser, MD, followed the life of a certified teenage genius trying to exist in 2 worlds that had no business overlapping. The series starred Neil Patrick Harris as Doogie, Max Casella as his perpetually clueless but fiercely loyal best friend, Vinny Delpino, and James Sicking and Belinda Montgomery as his parents. 2 people doing their best to raise a kid who was already more qualified than most of their colleagues. Today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about Doogie Howser, MD, that you probably never knew. And stick around for number 1 because the secret behind those convincing operating room scenes involved a trip to the grocery store. And it's not what you'd expect from a primetime network drama. But before we get into it, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps YouTube put this in front of more people who still remember that glowing blue computer screen at the end of every episode. All right, guys, grab your scalpel and your geometry book, and let's get into it. Number 15. The show was literally born on the throne. Most great TV ideas come from the writer's room, pitch meetings, or some caffeine-fueled epiphany at 2 in the morning. Doogie Howser, MD, came from a porcelain threshold.
You're gonna kill him,
Douglas.
and you don't give a crap.
Dr. Howser, you will behave.
Don't talk to me like you're my father. You're not.
Creator Stephen Bochco was doing exactly what you think he was doing. Sitting in the bathroom, flipping through an issue of New York Magazine, and completely minding his own business. The article that derailed everything was about 2 gifted kids from the same family. One a musical prodigy, and the other a mathematical one. Bochco's brain immediately went sideways. If you could be that kind of prodigy, why not any kind? Kids operating at a level that makes the rest of us want to lie down. Young people making fully grown adults feel deeply inadequate before breakfast. And somewhere in the middle of that article, Bochco had a thought so simple that it barely registered as an idea. What if one of these kids was a doctor? That was it. The whole thing. Born right there. By the time he got in the shower, the concept had already started filling itself in. A teenage genius with a stethoscope, a hospital, a family, the impossible balancing act of saving lives while still surviving high school.
We've got a red blanket gunshot.
1, 2, 3.
Packs up fast. 4 units are openers.
Okay, and draw blood type cross and lab.
Worth noting that Bochco's inspiration wasn't entirely abstract. He partially modeled Doogie on his own father, Rudolph Bochco, who had been a genuine child prodigy, a concert violinist. The bathroom epiphany was personal. Number 14. The script was in the patient the whole time. Medical dialogue on Doogie Howser wasn't exactly casual conversation. The scripts were packed with dense clinical terminology that would trip up a seasoned adult actor. And Harris was delivering it episode after episode, while also pretending to perform surgery.
His trachea's off to one side. He's got a pneumothorax. Let's get a chest tube in him.
I can't hold them.
So he built a system, a genuinely unhinged one. For the operating room scenes, Harris would cut small squares of dialogue from his script and set them right inside the fake surgical wound, glance down at the patient, grab the line, and deliver it clean. Nobody at home had any idea that they were watching a teenager read his lines out of a fake human torso. But that was just one piece of it. For everything else, he wrote lines on clipboards stationed around the set, then flipped the page mid-scene to catch the second half of whatever he was saying. The whole set was essentially a hidden teleprompter, and Harris had quietly engineered the whole thing himself.
Listen up. We got a red blanket here. Police officer, gunshot, chest wound, belly wound, bleeding. Mitchell, alert the surgical team and call the blood bank. Tell them we need 4 units of O-negative packed cell.
The mechanics were surprisingly elegant. Camera focused on his hands, his face, a clipboard. He grabbed what he needed and kept moving. It worked flawlessly every single time. The character was supposed to be the smartest person in the building, but it turns out the actor playing him was running a pretty convincing operation himself. Number 13. The most convincing teenager on TV had a driver's license. Max Casella was in his 20s for the entire run of Doogie Howser, MD, a full 6 years older than Neil Patrick Harris, who was an actual 16-year-old when the show premiered.
So what's the question? This is the greatest thing to happen to a 16-year-old guy in the history of hormones. You won the libido lottery, Howser.
His appearance, however, was running about a decade behind schedule, which made the whole setup beautifully backwards. Harris was the real teenager on set, memorizing dense medical dialogue and carrying entire episodes. Casella was a fully grown adult playing a lovably dimmed slacker who could barely keep up in gym class. The age gap was completely invisible on camera, and it worked anyway. What most people didn't know was that Casella's young appearance wasn't just luck. He had growth hormone deficiency, a condition that stunted his physical development so significantly that he didn't go through puberty until age 27 after medical intervention. Hollywood had essentially been casting a medical anomaly as a teenager for years, and nobody on either side of the screen had any idea.
Be sure you pack her real nice with those styrofoam peanuts. Hey, you still got the original box?
The condition came with real-world consequences offset too. Police officers pulled him over twice while driving, fully convinced that they just caught an underage kid joyriding in someone else's car. Both times, Casella sat on the side of the road, license in hand, explaining to skeptical cops that he's actually a fully grown adult who just happened to look like he should be studying for finals. 8 hours a day on set, he was playing a teenager pretending to be a grown-up. And then he'd wrap for the day, get in his car, and law enforcement would prove the whole thing wasn't much of a stretch. Number 12, the show about a prodigy couldn't keep his timeline straight. Now, the entire premise of Doogie Howser rested on one thing. This kid's academic credentials had to be airtight. Graduated college at 10, medical school at 14. The numbers were the show. You get them wrong, and the whole foundation cracks. So, naturally, the opening credits got it completely wrong. For the first 2 seasons, the title sequence walked through Doogie's academic milestones using newspaper clippings. And if you were paying any attention at all, something didn't quite add up. The credits stated that he completed high school in 9 weeks at age 12. They also stated that he graduated from Princeton at age 10. Princeton at 10 and high school at 12. Now, if you finished college at 10, you couldn't have finished high school at 12. That's not a prodigy quirk, that's just chronology. High school comes before college. That's been the arrangement for a while now. But nobody flagged it, nobody fixed it, and it just kind of sat there in the opening credits for 2 full seasons while millions of viewers either didn't notice or just quietly assumed that they were the ones doing the math wrong. The fix finally came in season 3. The high school clipping was quietly updated to say age 9 instead of 12. The show about television's most academically gifted teenager had scrambled the order of his own educational history for 2 years before anyone bothered to correct it. Doogie would have been mortified. Number 11, Puberty was not in the production budget. Now, the wardrobe department on Doogie Howser, MD, had just one job. Keep a teenage doctor looking like a credible professional.
I gave him digoxin, 0.125 milligrams, Lasix, 20 milligrams BID, and aldactone, 12.5 milligrams BID. Also, I'd like to send him to nuclear medicine for a cardiac scan at 9:30.
Thank you, Dr. Howser.
What they didn't account for was that their teenage doctor was going through a full-scale growth spurt in real time, on camera, mid-season. In the first 8 months of filming alone, Harris's shoe size changed 5 times. 5 in 8 months. At that pace, the costume team was operating a rotating shoe store with a very specific and increasingly expensive client. Every time they thought they had his measurements locked down, Harris would add another inch somewhere and the whole operation would start all over. It wasn't just his feet either. His height kept climbing. His frame kept filling out, and those carefully fitted lab coats started looking like hand-me-downs from a slightly smaller doctor who had transferred to another hospital.
Am I gonna die?
Hey, no way, forget that. We're gonna fix you up so we can get a really sick kid in here. Right, Dr. Josephson?
Right.
The character was supposed to be the most put-together person in the building. Behind the scenes, the wardrobe department was essentially chasing puberty around the set with a measuring tape and a growing sense of defeat. Number 10, the lead actor had homework due between takes. Now, Neil Patrick Harris was the lead of a network drama, delivering dense medical dialogue in front of cameras, crew, and guest stars.
His creatinine is elevated. He can't survive a transplant.
According to these test results, he most certainly can. The boy's mother's already given her consent.
On your recommendation. But statistically, he's got a better chance if we just repair the valve.
And then, a second assistant director would tap him on the shoulder and drag him off to do homework. California labor laws required minor actors to complete 3 hours of schooling every single day on set. Harris was in virtually every scene of the show, which meant production couldn't exactly schedule a relaxed lunch break study hall and just call it done. Instead, they carved the school day into the smallest pieces legally allowable. 20-minute chunks squeezed into whatever gaps appear between takes or rehearsals. The second assistant director essentially functioned as a hall monitor with a walkie-talkie. The moment a gap opened up, Harris would get whisked off set and handed over to his on-set teacher. The second that 20th minute ticked over, there was a knock on the door, and Harris was pulled right back in front of the cameras before the cycle could start all over again.
I'm quitting the class.
Why?
What do you mean, why? I completely humiliated myself. I was terrible.
Oh, come on. Remember why we did this? Not to be the best, but to broaden our horizons, you know?
All day, every day. Here's the part that makes the whole thing better. Harris graduated high school with high honors in 1991. He credited the on-set tutoring system for it. The kid being yanked out of a TV drama every 20 minutes for a lesson somehow came out on the other side with an honors diploma. Doogie Howser? He would have approved. Number 9. Before he was Doogie, he paid a visit to the original. Before stepping in front of the cameras as Doogie Howser, Neil Patrick Harris did something that most 16-year-olds preparing for a TV role would never think to do. He went looking for the man who had done it first. Harris had been watching Robert Young in Marcus Welby, MD, the show that had essentially written the rulebook on what a television doctor was supposed to look like and feel like. Calm, compassionate, the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself.
When did he have his last checkup?
I don't know.
Childhood diseases?
I don't know.
For a teenager about to step into Scrubs and convince a national audience that he actually belonged there, those tapes were homework. Then, Harris found out that Young was seriously ill and struggling, so he didn't just watch the tapes. He showed up. Harris visited Young in person and brought the Marcus Welby episodes with him. Not to learn from them in a conference room somewhere, but to sit with a sick man and remind him what he'd built still mattered. That a 16-year-old about to play a teenage doctor had gone looking specifically for him.
If you could just hold a little still, Mr. Finkelstein.
You'll be holding still for a big fat lawsuit in federal court. 16 years old.
It was a quietly generous thing to do, and according to everyone who knew about it, it genuinely helped lift Young's spirits. Harris had studied the right doctor before playing one. And then he went on to make sure that that doctor knew it. Number 8. Neil Patrick Harris's parents only said yes because of one name. Neil Patrick Harris was 16 when Doogie Howser landed in front of him. His parents were both lawyers, which meant that the negotiation that followed was not exactly a quick conversation over dinner. The Harris family were movie people. A film role was one thing. Their son had already done that, but a full network television series? Well, that meant a long production schedule in Los Angeles, uprooting the family from New Mexico, and putting a permanent pin in everything else. Their position was firm, with one very specific exception. If the show came from Stephen Bochco, they'd hear it out. Not just any producer, but Bochco specifically, the man behind Hill Street Blues and L.A. Law, two of the most respected dramas on television. Harris later recalled his parents saying that they were huge fans of both shows. To them, Bochco's name on a project meant serious creative standards and an environment where their kid wouldn't get chewed up by Hollywood before he turned 17. Here's where the timing gets almost suspicious. At the exact moment that his parents drew that line in the sand, Bochco was already developing a show about a teenage doctor. So when the Doogie Howser script arrived with Bochco's name attached, there wasn't much left to argue about. His parents had essentially described this exact project before it existed, and then it showed up anyway. Harris recalled, a script comes down the pipe for a precocious teen doctor, by Stephen Bochco of all people, so they said they may as well audition. One of the most beloved shows of the late 80s got made because two lawyers in New Mexico had very high standards, and the universe decided to meet them. Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying this deep dive into everything weird and wild about Doogie Howser, hit that like button and subscribe. It helps YouTube show this to more people who love 80s deep dives. Drop a comment with the fact that surprised you the most. All right, back to Eastman. Number 7, ABC hated it, tried to kill it, took all the credit, and then torched it themselves. Stephen Bochco handed ABC a half-hour comedy drama about a teenage doctor, and the network responded with the television executive equivalent of a full-body cringe.
Got an unidentified body in bin number 8. Even money, it was probably someone under your care.
This was not what they ordered. ABC wanted a goofy sitcom. Laugh track, light stakes, maybe a wacky neighbor. What Bochco delivered had actual weight to it. A coming-of-age medical show that took its premise seriously. That nearly buried the whole project before a single frame was shot. Until they discovered that Bochco had been in this business long enough to see that move coming. Buried in his contract was a clause that essentially said, cancel this and you're writing a very large check. Suddenly, the hard pass softened into a reluctant, fine, make the pilot. And then the pilot tested, massively. David E. Kelley later said it plainly, it went on the air because of how it tested, not because anyone at the network actually believed in it. 4 seasons later, ABC finally got the last word. The cancellation came late in season 4, after Bochco had already moved on to other projects following season 3. The writers had almost no time to wrap things up, and the finale had Doogie abruptly quitting medicine to find himself in Europe, landing like a diagnosis with no explanation attached. Bochco had envisioned a full final season where the pressure slowly drains Doogie's passion for medicine until he rediscovers himself as a writer.
Ready? Let's move him. 1, 2, 3.
EKG's normal, pulse 98.
Well, let's see how he does without the mask suit.
Put an art line.
Let's take it down.
Those diary entries becoming the beginning of a whole new chapter. Harris found out the show was canceled the same way the rest of the country did. He read it in a newspaper. The network that almost killed the show before it aired couldn't even be bothered to make a phone call at the end. Number 6, the show came back with a whole new Doogie. Decades after Doogie Howser typed his last diary entry and signed off for good, someone at Disney Plus looked at the original premise and decided that the world needed it again. In 2021, Doogie Kamealoha, MD, arrived on Disney Plus, transplanting the entire concept of Los Angeles to Hawaii and handing the stethoscope to Lahela, a 16-year-old female medical prodigy played by Peyton Elizabeth Lee. New setting, new character, same impossible balancing act. The reboot made one creative choice that elevated the whole thing. In this version, the original Doogie Howser actually exists inside the show's universe.
Is this some kind of practical joke?
She may be 16, but she is a doctor.
You know who she's like?
Here we go.
Remember Doogie Howser? That show from the 90s? She's like a real-life Doogie Howser. That's why we call her Doogie.
Lahela gets the nickname specifically because people see the resemblance to the character from the old TV show. The original Doogie went from fictional teenager to in-universe cultural reference point, which is either a sign of genuine legacy or the most surreal compliment a fictional character has ever received. The update came with the expected modern touches. Video journals swapped in for the glowing blue computer screen, a Hawaiian soundtrack in place of the original theme, but the architecture underneath stayed about the same, and that's exactly the point.
Get off me.
You want to go to jail?
You'll be going to jail for criminal negligence. This man has a fractured dislocation of the hip, and he's going to lose his leg unless I fix it right away.
The specific details change. The story of a kid carrying adult weight while still trying to figure out who they are doesn't. It ran for 2 seasons and 20 episodes before Disney Plus canceled it in 2023, which, given that the original also got the plug pulled before it got a proper ending, means that the reboot was more faithful to its source material than anyone probably intended. Number 5, the show invented internet blogging. Every episode of Doogie Howser MD closed the same way. Dim lights, quiet music, and Doogie settling in front of his computer to type out his thoughts like the most emotionally articulate teenager in recorded history. Bochco put these journal entries there deliberately. They were the show's emotional signature, a way to let the audience inside Doogie's head after each episode. And as we know now, they were also quietly building towards something bigger. Bochco's original plan had Doogie eventually leaving medicine to become a writer, and those journal entries were the foreshadowing. The whole thing was engineered from the start. What Bochco probably didn't anticipate was just how precisely he described the future. First-person reflections, episode-closing entries, personal thoughts processed through a keyboard and stored on a screen. That's a blog. That's a social media post. That's essentially the architecture of how millions of people communicate their inner lives today. And Doogie was doing it in 1989 on ABC. Now, in the late 80s, having a home computer at all put you firmly in the "this kid is going places" territory. Using one as a personal diary was the kind of detail designed to give the show a sleek, modern edge. But what it accidentally did was get there first. Decades before oversharing online became a defining feature of modern life, Doogie Howser was already sitting at his glowing blue screen, quietly working out the whole concept one episode at a time. Number 4, Doogie Howser once treated Mother Earth as a patient. In 1990, ABC aired a 2-hour Earth Day special, and whoever was in charge of the casting breakdown apparently had no guardrails whatsoever. The premise, Mother Earth, played by Bette Midler, falls from the sky, collapses from the effects of pollution, and gets rushed into the emergency room.
You're the only one who deserves to live here. You know, for a long time, I was all right. But then came the Industrial Revolution.
Her doctors, Doogie Howser, naturally, flanked by Dana Delaney and James Brolin. Murphy Brown, played by Candace Bergen, covered the breaking news. Danny DeVito watched from home and gave 2-to-1 odds that she wouldn't make it. Then, Doc Brown showed up. Christopher Lloyd, in full costume, arriving in the DeLorean, had just come back from the year 2057, where he witnessed the last rainforest being destroyed. He pulls Doogie aside and delivers a slideshow of environmental disasters across time. A 16-year-old fictional surgeon and a time-traveling scientist from a movie franchise sharing screen time on a network special, trying to save a personified dying planet. And that's not the whole cast either. The Golden Girls were there, and so were the full casts of Cheers and The Cosby Show. Robin Williams, Meryl Streep, Dustin Hoffman, Michael Keaton, Kermit the Frog, E.T., even Bugs Bunny all showed up. Harold Ramis played Egan Spengler's brother, who had founded an organization called Wastebusters. It was one of the most sprawling crossover events in network television history, and somehow Doogie Howser ended up at the center of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to report on Mother Earth's condition. I wish I had better news, but I don't.
It exists. You can watch it. And it is exactly as unhinged as it sounds. And nobody involved seems to have questioned any of it for even a moment. Number 3, the hospital was real. Kind of. For a show built around the premise that a teenager could pass as a credible medical professional, Doogie Howser, MD, worked surprisingly hard to sell the illusion, starting with the building itself. The exterior shots of Eastman Medical Center were filmed at a real working Los Angeles hospital.
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Mickling?
Yes?
Hi. We just want you to know we realize that being a patient is frustrating, especially for someone as independent as yourself.
Lending the show the kind of visual credibility that a fabricated Hollywood facade simply just couldn't deliver. The building looked like the real thing because, well, it was the real thing. Crossed the threshold, though, and the real hospital, it disappeared entirely. The operating rooms, the hallways, nurses' stations where Doogie delivered dense medical dialogue while secretly reading his lines off clipboards stationed around the set. Yeah, all of it was built on sound stages at 20th Century Fox Studios in Century City. Carefully constructed sets, real medical equipment sourced for authenticity, and consultants on hand to make sure that nothing looked jarringly wrong to anyone who had actually spent time in a hospital. The combination worked because each half did exactly what the other couldn't. The real building gave the show its credibility from the outside. The controlled soundstage gave the production the flexibility to put a teenage actor through his paces without shutting down an actual emergency room to do it.
Get a fetal monitor, hurry. Right. Alert OB and get the on-call doctor on the phone.
Right away.
Okay, don't try to move.
A real hospital on the exterior, a TV set on the interior. And somewhere in the middle, a 16-year-old convincing millions of people every week that he was the most capable doctor in the whole building. And the entire show ran on that exact illusion. And it held up for 4 seasons. Number 2, a fictional teenager ended up in a real science lab. Now, most TV characters get a good run, maybe a memorable catchphrase, and then spend eternity in cable reruns. Doogie Howser got all of that and somehow ended up in a research lab. When real-world prodigy Balamurali Ambati graduated from medical school at 17 years old and entered the Guinness Book of World Records as the youngest doctor in history, the media went straight to the real-life Doogie Howser. The nickname landed immediately because by that point, Doogie had already become the universal shorthand for any kid whose intelligence made everyone else feel like they had just been wasting their time. Ambati, for his part, was reportedly not thrilled about the comparison. Hard to blame him. The man held the Guinness World Record, but being compared to a fictional character probably wasn't at the top of his wish list. But then, things got genuinely strange. In 1999, neurobiologist Joe Tsien at Princeton University genetically engineered a strain of mice by manipulating a single gene, producing animals with significantly enhanced learning and memory. The mice learned faster, remembered longer, and retained juvenile brain features well into adulthood. The research landed on the cover of Time magazine and made Science magazine's list of the top 10 breakthroughs of the year. Tsien named them the Doogie mice. Actual scientists in an actual lab reached for a fictional teenage TV doctor when they needed a name that communicated exceptional intelligence. Not Einstein, not Hawking, but Doogie. There was one catch. The Doogie mice were also found to have a significantly heightened sensitivity to pain. They were smarter than every other mouse in the building and considerably more aware of it when something got hurt. Number 1, the cast practiced surgery on raw chickens. The operating room scenes on Doogie Howser looked convincing for a very specific reason. And that reason was supermarket poultry. To sell the surgical realism, the cast didn't just study medical textbooks and call it a day. Harris had described it plainly. They were handed suture packs, they were sent to the nearest Ralph's and told to get a chicken breast, and then they would practice actual suturing techniques on raw poultry, learning the proper needle angles and hand positioning until the movements looked second nature. which means that at some point in 1989, Neil Patrick Harris was hunched over a raw chicken breast in a rehearsal room, drilling surgical technique like it was homework, which, well, technically it was. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. The chickens, they didn't stay in the rehearsal room. The raw chicken was also used on camera. Dressed with gauze and positioned inside the prop wound, it stood in for the human tissue during the actual surgical scenes that aired on primetime ABC. Audiences watching Doogie stitch up a patient were, without knowing it, watching a teenager suture a chicken breast. The logic was completely sound. Close-up camera work is brutally unforgiving, and a doctor who handles surgical tools like he's never seen them before will pull an audience right out of a scene. So the production found the cheapest, most practical solution available, one aisle over from the produce section. And it worked. The surgical scenes had a credibility that most medical dramas with adult casts couldn't match. All because someone looked at the budget, looked at a grocery store circular, and made a very practical call. And there you have it, 15 weird and wild facts about Doogie Howser, MD. Which one surprised you the most? Well, drop it in the comments and share this with a friend who still remembers that glowing blue computer screen. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. And until next time, this is Remember When.